Hi, welcome to Altercation. Tonight we've got Marcus Hobson with us, who's a writer and reviewer. And as usual, we've got Devat, we've got Polly, and I'm John. Welcome. Today we're at the incubator, and Marcus has just done a review of this amazing book called Grim Tales, which is supporting the Women's Refuge. Amazing illustrations and short stories about the trials and tribulations of the ladies involved in the book. What did you think of it?
I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a brilliant concept, just a really different approach. And I also found it really difficult to review. You know, most of the time, or almost all the time, I review fiction.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to write about real things. Even though the tales themselves are fairy stories, it's very difficult when you're dealing with people's real emotions.
Yeah.
And because we're dealing with abuse and hurtful things, it's even more difficult. You know, when you write a review and you go, I don't like this character, or you criticise something. You have no difficulty doing that about a piece of fiction, because it's not real. The people in it aren't real. The characters aren't real. Even though these are made up stories, that underneath them they have that sense of danger and reality and harm and difficulty all sitting underneath.
Well, they are true stories, but they've just been made into fairy tales to make it approachable for people. And then they can look further if they want to follow it up.
It was a great idea to do it like this, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And not kind of make it like on the nose, in your face, kind of like, once we're warriors-ish.
Yeah.
And that turning what was in many ways an unpleasant experience into a fairy story also had a different take, because it in some way kind of made it slightly more sinister. Because you've taken away that immediacy of like screen violence, that had been moved aside, and you turned it into something in some way slightly more chilling, because you'd introduced that sense of a fairy story and a children's story into it, and in one sense that I found that made it even more chilling, because it wasn't so immediate. It wasn't like a narrative of somebody being hurt or hit or abused in some way. It was even more sinister than that.
Oh yeah,
that's what I really enjoyed about it.
Well, the other part was it made it. I mean, it was a difficult process anyway. There are a couple of us here that have been involved with it, but it made it slightly easier maybe for the ladies to tell the story, knowing that it wasn't going to be directly attributed to them.
Sure. Unless
they wanted to be known in the book. So it was, it was protecting people's identities and where they wanted that. So
I think Tauranga itself and the whole sort of area should be very proud of it. I think it's a fantastic creation, just to one, to help the Women's Refuge, two, to show the story writers, and then the artists who've come along as well and create, and all of this sort of creative talent that's come together to put that together. I think the whole region should be really proud.
Well, is it?
Such
was it?
Yeah, I think so.
And I think
very much so.
it's a great thing to do.
Oh, look, there's no doubt in my mind that the more we can do to raise awareness of the situation of violence and abuse, and to make it public so people talk about it, so they actually have a conversation about it, and it's not hidden and put aside. People can talk about it and raise it. I think that really helps. I've been involved in the past in a counselling group that worked with men who had hit people and who had been violent, and working with a group of men for 20 odd weeks to talk about their experiences and how they felt and try and work out their inner emotions. I saw some very violent people go from monsters, week one, to very reformed people who were helping others through the experience 20 weeks later. Really, really interesting just by that conversation. So anything that helps that conversation happen and gets it out in the open is a really good thing.
Yeah.
In my view.
It was a massive undertaking because, I mean, there's 13 ladies, 13 artists, 13 storytellers, plus the other people that were involved with the actual publishing side of it,
like editing
and the graphic
all that
design
stuff.
side, editing. Yeah, it was there were probably 50 people involved all up. It was
Yeah. And the
crazy, but
campaign.
fantastic.
So you couldn't remove the real stories from the fairy tales. Like, even though, like, the fairy tales, if you just read them on your own without knowing that, it was a part of this history,
Sure.
then, it'll be kind of different.
If you just had the fairy stories, it would be completely different.
Yeah.
It's the reality that goes with
Yeah.
it, and it's the little comments that the ladies make at the end, where they express a little bit about what they went through and how, in some cases, it's helped them. They said, just being able to tell that story has been helpful. In other cases, you could sense it was still very raw, and they got a long way to go before they got over some of those things. Everybody has a long process of getting through some of that, and you could sense that as well in their comments.
Yeah.
But no, it's great. Really enjoyed it.
So anybody that's looking for a copy of this book, it's available through Books of Plenty, or it can be got through the incubator. So check it out.
Also, there's a website at grimtales.co.nz or .nz.
I'm not too sure on that one,
Yeah.
but if you click on
But
it, you
just
probably
look up-
find it.
Yeah, just look up Grimtales art book.
Yeah,
down
it'll
there.
come up.
Yeah, it'll come
In
up.
many places. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the secret. They market it everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incubator.
So, Marcus, you're a storyteller in your own right, a writer. You've just sort of partway through your second book, and you've finished your first one, which apparently you're self-publishing now. How's that going?
It's an interesting journey. If somebody had said, what would you like to be, I would have always said I would love to be a writer. It's just taken me 50 years to get to the point where I'm actually writing something that I could put out there. But it's very hard, to come along and go, right, I've written a novel, I've had this story and it's been in my head for, I think it must have been about 20 years, sitting there going, I want to come out, and finally actually putting it onto the paper and ending up with 100,000 words.
Yeah.
And then to go,
That's
right,
massive,
where do I go with this now? What do I do with it? And instantly all you get is, nobody's ever heard of you. You take it to publishers and they go, well, who are you?
But I mean, it's the same for any artistic person. If you're starting in writing or in music or whatever, you've got to start somewhere and got to put it out there.
And I think I kind of arrived with a book rather than arriving with a few short stories or a few little bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So, and then I think I had to do a reality check and say, actually, somebody needs to know who I am or what I'm about or a little bit about me before I launch a book out onto the world. So that's when I started doing a bit more reviewing and writing a few other bits and pieces, just to try and get the name Marcus Hobson out there somewhere.
It's probably the hardest part, isn't it?
It is.
Doing your own thing is fine, but the self-promotion afterwards, that's the part that people struggle with and can make and break you unless you can find somebody that can do that for you.
I do feel that those old channels are still there, but the internet is kind of coming up in terms of
definitely
promoting yourself. Through
Which I think
various
makes
outlets.
it even more difficult in some ways because there's such a huge volume.
Yeah.
There's so much going on, isn't
Yes.
there?
Yeah,
You get
exactly.
lost in that tide of things.
It's kind of like
That's
brought
the
out all
difficulty,
all the garage bands and all the Tumblr writers, who just do blog posts and stuff that are just very
I mean, at one time you go down to your local bookstore or to the library and get a book. Now, like places like Amazon,
Kindle,
thousands and thousands, or Kindle.
Kindle,
just all that. Yeah, it's very.
But it's, publishing's still big.
Sure.
But I'm just not sure how you get in there these days because I've got friends that working in publishing.
Yeah.
And quite in Sydney and New York and all that sort of stuff. But I'm not sure how people get into that stream anymore.
I think
self-publishing's good because at least
you've got something out there.
Yeah,
That's right. And I think that's part of the secret is to have things out there, and then if they do get a little bit successful, if they begin to take off a little bit, then that's when
maybe go to a publisher.
That's when publishers kind of snap people up and go, well, you've already got a track record.
Yes.
And it's having that track record that is the kind of part that you need, but you can't get that without publishing the book. So it's a bit of a it's a vicious circle of things.
Well, it's like the band on a little indie label, and then they suddenly find that their records take off, and suddenly you've got to go to a major label to get that many done. You know, it's just a fact of life.
Someone to help to edit, or do you self-edit, or?
I had somebody look at my first novel, and she didn't do it as in a detailed edit, but she gave me a lot of tips and a lot of help. But she was also tremendously encouraging, because the first thing she said was, that would make a brilliant movie or a TV show. Yeah. And it kind of, my writing is very visual. I see a lot of pictures in it. And so I guess it's a novel that's set in France, mainly. Because I spent a lot of time in France many years ago, and I love that sort of artistic culture and the heat and the down in the vineyards in the south of France and this sort of thing. And so I mixed up all the sort of art and the wine and the landscape, but it's all But I was writing it here in New Zealand from memories that are sort of 20 years old. But they're so strong because they're all visual. They're all pictures and places and statues and paintings and things like this. So they're all mixed in there.
Because that's another avenue is people buy up novels for film scripts.
Sure.
That's a huge thing.
For like adaptations and stuff.
Yes.
And the money side of it, you're probably a lot better off actually getting it produced as a film than selling your books.
So I've got lots of people in film who do that.
You're also a part of the Town Writers film. That's
right. Yeah.
That's going to be coming up for its 50th anniversary.
Yes.
Wow.
Very excited about the events that we've got planned for 2017.
Yeah.
Seems to be something going on every month. We're also going to try and get all the writers to do a week of blogging, to put that on the website, so they can promote themselves a little bit through that. I don't know how I'm going to corral up at least 50 people to give me a week's worth of blog, but I'm going to try my best.
It sounds like a difficult process.
It's curating all creative people.
Herding cats.
Herding cats. Exactly.
But I mean, going back to your book, I mean, you've got the background though. You've been to the south of France. You know some of the area. You've spent some time there, but also you've got a background. I was looking up. I've been stalking you online. So you've got your degree in ancient medieval history.
That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got the background there to know what you're talking about, really. I love history, and that it gives you it comes with so many stories. And that's what I love about it. And I suppose I got into using Twitter for the first time this year.
Yeah.
And what I found is I can link to so many interesting things that come along. I did, as well as my history, I did archaeology as well. So I dug things up for a while. I spent some summers literally digging up Vikings and digging up Roman villas and things like that.
Awesome.
Which is very tangible, very real history. You're touching the bits of bones and things like that. But what I love now is that there are so many people who are capturing pictures of things they dug up and things they found. Yeah. It's all very immediate.
Yeah. But kind of just going around on social media.
It's everywhere straight away. Whereas when I was doing it, you were lucky if somebody wrote it up 2 years after it had happened, and you found out the year after. It was a very slow, undynamic process. Whereas now, suddenly, as soon as somebody finds something, they take a picture of it, and it's everywhere. And it's, look at this! Oh wow! That's really interesting. And so so I can kind of still maintain that little interest to see things that are happening, or just.
But I mean, there's so many programs on TV now about archaeology, people actually on a site digging things up or whatever, there's it's just there and it's available or online, like you're saying, this is a painstaking process, just like writing your book, I suppose, but slowly sifting through, trying to find all the little bits and pieces and not messing it up by, standing on something or...
It's an interesting, archaeology is a fascinating discipline because it's a little bit like writing. It's also a little bit like being a detective, which is good if you want to do a bit of detective fiction. But you find something, and then you come up with a hypothesis of what you thought had gone on.
Yeah.
And
this
then
is often just fragments.
That's right. And then you start applying science, and then you start getting different answers, and then you start different hypotheses about what's going on. So.
And there can also be kind of conflicting opinion about it, like what went on in terms of what the scientists think and what archaeologists think and what other archaeologists think and academia and things like that as well. Yeah.
I'll give you a real life example. So I spent a summer digging up 250 Vikings in a vicar's garden somewhere in the middle of England.
Right.
And in this little village called Repton, the Vikings had spent the winter there. They'd sailed down the rivers, and it was 874.
Wow.
And so in that winter, we know from a written record that they spent the winter in this little place. So when we dig up this big pit with these 250 skeletons, the first thing we do is we find that there are no little bones. All the fingers and toes have gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the immediate thing is, and your historical fact that they spent the winter there. So you go, I wonder if these were the people who lived in the village, who went out and fought against the Vikings, who were all killed and left on a battlefield, and then the crows and all the other things come and pick the little bones off, and they've all gone, and then somebody's gathered them up and buried them all together. So that was hypothesis number one, seemed the most logical. Then you can start to overlay that with science. So you can look at teeth, and you can find out where that person grew up. So from the calcium deposit in the teeth, you can see where the water was they were drinking in the first few years of their life.
Okay.
And
That's so fascinating.
Oh yeah, so you can
especially these days.
All these 250 people all came from either southern Sweden or Denmark.
Right.
So you've immediately said they're not natives.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then you can do radiocarbon testing on the bones and you can date them. And then you can find out, as we did eventually, that the 250 were all more than 150 or 300 years old when they were put in the ground.
Oh, right.
They were actually the bones of the ancestors that came on the ships with them.
Oh, I see.
And that had never been found before. Nobody realised that the Vikings carried some of those ancestors around with them. The difficult thing is then, why did they put them in the ground? What was the event that caused them all to be buried at that time? You know? And it probably was that it was settling down, and the little site was a royal site. There were kings of Mercia buried there. So
because you always think of especially the kings or noble people from the Viking days, you sort of got this idea that they set them on fire and sent them out, or that sort of thing.
Kirk Douglas and Tony Curtis, they pushed them off and fire arrows into it. And sometimes they buried people in ships, but they dragged them up onto the land and covered them over. But no, in this case, they were all buried in a big circular enclosure.
So what was the deal with the fingers? That was it? You don't know?
Well, if you've been carrying those around for up to 300 years, yes, you've lost all the little bones. They've all gone over the side.
Oh, right.
I thought you were going to come up with they made them into jewellery or something really, dark and creepy.
I haven't got a good story about them.
But that's amazing because you think of the Vikings sort of marauding and the rape and pillage sort of thing, but they didn't. They actually came into the UK and thought, oh, this is better than living in some icy wasteland, we'll stay here. And they sort of, they maybe didn't at first join in with the local population, but then they eventually sort of, sort of, get all the different dialects and things around the area. Which
all over the eastern side of England, there are lots of, you can literally chart them by the names of the villages. So villages that end in BY, They're usually on a ridgetop or a little bit of high ground.
Oh, okay, yep.
Those are Viking settlements.
Oh, right.
Those are, literally, we know that from the place name. So BY or ending in Thorpe, those are old Viking settlements. And sometimes there's something called a Grimston hybrid, which is where it's got a bit of an English word in it and a Danish word in it. So there is a place called Grimston, and TON is Old English for a settlement by a river. So that's the English part, and Grim was a Viking name. So the two joining together.
Like Grimsby in the north of England.
Grimsby is a Viking.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, all of those places kind of carry that little memory in their names, which is fascinating.
Excellent.
It doesn't work then when they call somewhere else in America or in New Zealand Grimsby, because it's lost, but it's original.
Right.
It's kind of lost
and
its heritage.
I've also found it interesting is that the street names, like the names of streets wherever, the British have come and colonized. Like even in India, some street names are similar to street names here.
Yeah.
Just because
named after royalty or
or just
famous people that worked on that area or
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind
That's
of interesting.
amazing. So you also
the process,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a long historical process.
Process of colonization.
Yeah.
So you also do a lot of book reviewing for Art BOP, and how do you find that? Deconstructing other people's work, being a writer yourself.
I think you're constantly learning.
Yeah.
Definitely, you're seeing how other people do things, and I love reading, and I've kind of morphed that into writing about what I've read and the different styles. I do find it a little bit sad in some ways that a lot of the reviewing that happens is a review of something that's just come out.
Yeah.
So the latest book gets the review, and the latest books in the newspaper or is talked about. But what about the really wonderful old books that we've that have been around a long time?
The classic
that are
books,
still really good. And I like, if I can, to bring some of those old things in, if I can do that into a review and say, this style is a bit like somebody else's, or here's another really good example of something like that. So
well, you have to, because otherwise people have got no point of reference. It's like a piece of music. It sounds like such and such a band. Yeah. Oh well, I'll check that out because I like those guys, so I'll probably like that. Same sort of thing.
And I like I have these weaknesses for certain genres. I love a good James Bond book, and that's fascinating in itself because
I've got some Ian Fleming.
Ian Fleming's original books are really good.
Graham Greene.
But then with Fleming, it's really interesting because he's been imitated by people. So lots of people have literally been by the people who own his estate have been given the right to write another James Bond book. So they've kind of been commissioned. So you started in literally 2 or 3 years after Fleming died. Kingsley Amis was given the job to imitate.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and he did a really good job. And so it's reading. You read all the Ian Fleming books, and then you start reading the imitators. And it's funny because the first book that was written was literally in the late 60s, so it was of the period and of the style. Yeah. And then there was a big gap until the 80s when somebody else was given the job, and he tried to update James Bond. He tried to bring him into the 80s and put him in a Saab turbo and make him a little bit green and not.
But I mean, part of that's because they've run out of stories to make movies about, and they have to update them because. In the books you wouldn't have cell phones, you wouldn't have he'd be driving the latest car.
And speaking of the movie adaptations, even the Bourne Identity was a book, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But so those movies, in terms of action movies, I love the old Bourne Identity movie, by the way. I think it was very cool. But the new ones are just straight action, like modern day, espionage, conspiracy things. So, they had to do the same with James Bond, I guess, just in terms of how Hollywood works, Sure. But still keep the James Bond feel to it.
Yeah. It's funny. Even some of the the recent James Bond movies have taken the title of an original thing. So Quantum of Solace was a short story written by Ian Fleming, but it bears no relation whatsoever to the movie. There's no other link. There's nothing from that story in, but they've just used the title.
Yeah.
But something like Casino Royale, which has been made a couple of times, was actually quite faithful to the original book. Yes, all the gimmicks and the gizmos and the Aston Martin is the latest Aston Martin, but the actual plot was very faithful to the original, and that's what made it such a good film, because it had that underlying sort of bit of skill in the writing of the plot. So
cool.
fun.
It must make it difficult for the writers though, because I mean they have got to put those things in. They've got to put all the latest gizmos in. They've got to get the people to back the story. So they've been through the Aston Martins and Lotuses, and
that's how they get like money. If you watch the last Transformers movie, it's a complete sellout in terms of product placement. There's no reason for Mark Wahlberg to be drinking Bud Light, just in the middle of an action scene. But you see it,
Well, you've got to make movies somehow. To get the money.
All right, that's all we've got time for, unfortunately. It's been great talking to you, Marcus, and thank you very much for coming along to Altercation.
Thank you.
So we can check out your reviews on artbop.co.nz.
That's right, and also on NZ Book Lovers.
All right.
Plenty of them on there as well.
Awesome.
And looking forward to your books and short stories coming out.
Fingers crossed.
And once those do, we'll give you a plug on the show and get you out there as a thank you for coming along.
All right, cool, man.
Thank you.
Sweet.
Thank you.